Welcome to Slayerfest 98. I'm Ian Carlos Crawford.
And I'm May Schultz, and we are here joined by two very special guests to talk about the season 1 finale of The Magicians. We have actor extraordinaire, current star of Palm Royale, Dominic Burgess, as well as author Lev Grossman, who wrote the Magicians novels and the upcoming Bright Sword.
Hi, everybody. I am so happy that Lev and Dominic, you have been so nice about being like, hey, but let me know when you get to an episode with Ember because I want to come on.
Here we are. We made it.
Finally got here. Everyone was very patient with me. This one got delayed because, as I told everyone before recording, when I get ahead of something, I always end up falling behind. And it's like, oh, I left 2 episodes to record. And then it's like, ooh, those are supposed to air right now. So we're a little late, but that's okay. We're still here. Dominic, do you want to tell us your magician's origin, like how you got the job of Ember? I am very curious because this was like my first introduction to you. And then since then, I'm like, oh, that's Dominic. Oh, there, like I see you.
There he is. There he is.
Things. Yeah.
Just what I wanted. Gosh, this was, I think, back in 2015. And this might have been my first self-tape audition that I ever did because I was working out of town. I think I was working on Roots in New Orleans. So I was out of town and I got a self-tape request. I still have my audition tape. I found it the other day while I was transferring stuff from an old hard drive. And my beard is big and bushy because I was going from job to job to job. And it had sort of serendipitously worked out that they were like, oh, let's keep the beard. We'll keep the beard. We'll keep the beard. And it got longer and longer and longer. And so the first time I appear as Ember, it is my own big beard. And then in subsequent seasons, I was shaved or I was doing other work where my facial hair was shorter. And so it's a fake beard for all the other appearances. But season 1 is all beard. I
love that.
Auditioned in actually probably a pretty similar shirt to what I had on now, and it was sort of open, and it was kind of the language was so fun, and I remember loving it. My hair was long and straggly, and I'm a little bit slovenly by not like I don't live like a pig, but I'm just sort of a casual bear, and I'm like, great.
Casual bear.
That was a good
I picked up all the books. I've still got my trilogy of books here, and I got the role, and then I was like, okay, it's time for a deep dive, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Thank you, Lev, and yeah, had a marvelous old time on set, getting to work with the effects company and getting the mold, and you let me know how much is too much because we can talk about the prosthetic stuff down the line or now, wherever works.
I would love to hear about it, actually. I'm always interested in that stuff.
I think the first time we did the prosthetics, it took about 5 hours. You go up, and I went up to Vancouver, and it was they first of all gel your hair back, and then it is a helmet that they sort of glue onto your head with 2 metal posts affixed so that the horns will stay on, and then it's a latex appliance. I think that was a forehead and nose piece, and then the hair pieces, and then all the blending, and the dirt is actually just coffee grinds. So Ember smelled like coffee, which was delightful. And then they actually glued my legs sort of to my torso to sort of mesh the fur into my belly. And oh my gosh, my feet! My feet are size 13 stilettos with the heel removed to create the goat shape, which was really something to walk in. And so I had a staff to sort of balance myself. There must be somewhere video footage of me testing stilts where there were 4 stuntmen all around me. and I maybe made it 10 feet before someone was like, "Oh, yeah, I don't think this is going to work." And then they ended up on the stilettos. And then I do have a pair of comfort shoes off camera. You might have seen Olivia wearing them in a behind the scenes picture. They're like 8-inch high foam work boots. I'll find some pictures. I've got so many pictures. I'll send you some pictures that you
I would
can
love that.
throw up.
I would love that. I was wondering if it was like, I was very curious about the hoofs, like how that was done, if it was just like fully something else that they were like imposing, or how did you walk in them without the heels?
Well, I had the staff, and I can do it for short stints. The problem was, not to give away any future season spoilers, the first 2 seasons they were fine, and then something happens to Ember at the end of season 2, and then I'm not there for season 3, and then they were like, "Oh, we're going to bring you back," and by that time the shoes had been in storage, and so they had shrunk. And so my appearances in season 4 and 5, the shoes were biting.
No.
But we suffer for our art, and I loved it. And Ember's such a wonderful, rich, dynamic, foppish, flamboyant, dark, and twisted character that it's so fun. And that first season, it was one day. It was just one day shooting. And
Dominic, you are in it a lot. Like in my brain, I did look up later. So I was like, oh, well, Dominic's in like every season, right? And like, I saw that you were not. I was like, oh, not in season 3, really? And like,
yeah,
you really like definitely make an imprint with like the few scenes you have. Like Ember feels like a bigger character to me. Like, Ember feels like a character that had way more scenes than he actually does.
They the groundwork had been laid, and his symbolism is all over the place. It's on the clock, and it's sort of omnipresent throughout. And I forgot, that's where I met my fiance.
I was waiting for you to tell that part of the story. You told me that.
I went up to Vancouver, and not on the Magician set, but my fiance was filming the third Planet of the Apes film at the time on the same studio lot or in the vicinity. And now we're engaged. And
I love that.
Thanks be to the magicians. That's real magic.
I have told Lev this 800,000 times, but like I have, covered a lot of shows, and I feel like the magicians, y'all are like, everyone has nothing but nice things to say. Everyone seems to like mostly have liked each other, and like on set everyone seems like they were pretty chill, which is nice. Like Lev was able to put me in touch with some folks, and yeah, like Summer and Arjun are always like pretty down whenever I email them, and yeah, it makes sense that it would be like a nice environment where like maybe I could meet someone that you get engaged to.
Yeah, I mean, Matt wasn't on the show, but if he was, actually, tell a lie, Matt was working on stunts in the second season.
Oh, really?
We were working in the old zoo, and he was just doing sort of safety stunts to make sure that I didn't fall off a ledge, I think in a polar bear exhibit, an old polar bear enclosure. So we did work together that one time. Yeah, and it was great. And I think I've mentioned to you before in it, when you're guesting on a show and you jump from show to show to show, sometimes it is hard to gauge if the series regular cast are going to be warm or approachable. And yeah, The Magicians is one of those shows where everyone is so open and delightful. And I can't remember if it was season 1 or season 2. It must have been season 2 because Trevor was there. But I got back to the hotel after filming one night, and then a car just pulls up, and Arjun and Trevor poke their heads out, and they're like, "Hey, we're gonna grab a drink. Jump in the car right now. Jump in the car. Jump in the car." Yeah, just wonderful, warm people, and it's a delight, and it's a real treat to have been a part of it.
Oh, and I also cannot believe that this is the first time you two are meeting. I just assumed. Lev, do you know who I meant, right? Because now I'm like, well, I casually was like, oh, Dominic might come on. And I'm like, oh, did I look stupid? And you were like, Ian, elaborate which Dominic you're talking about, or do you know what I was talking about?
It was clear. It was clear from
Okay.
context.
So we're here to talk about the finale.
The episode title.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, was
and every time I read it, I hear it in your voice, Dominic.
Oh, thank you so much. A lot of people will talk to me about, people always say, have you bought me little cakes? And it's funny because even though I'm in a lot of prosthetics, people recognize my voice the most from this show. And
Really?
you'll see people do a slow turn and be like, wait, are you, you are. Sorry to keep going into an American accent for that.
I was going to say,
I love it. It makes me laugh every time.
I love when you go into your American accent.
Just because I haven't been home to England in 10 years, so I've never experienced a British person being like, hang about. What's going on with your voice? Are you that magician's guy?
So good. I was going to ask because I feel like Summer had once mentioned that when her and Hale went to Pride in Toronto together, that they got recognized the most she's ever been recognized. And I was like, well, that also makes sense that they would get recognized at Pride, especially together. I feel like if my brain, like, if I didn't do this podcast and I saw them together, I'd be like, oh, that's weird. That looks like Margo and Elliot, but I would not assume that it was them together. But yeah, I was going to ask if you get like recognized from this because before I got to know you, that was what I always knew you from. And your voice is very you have a very good voice, Dominic. It's like,
oh, thank you.
I feel like you could do like narration or like audiobooks too on top of acting because like it's so distinct and like, I don't know. I can, yeah, it's a really good voice.
Oh, thank you so much. I'll take it. I'll save it for a rainy day.
I'm always like, when I have people on the podcast, I think about that. Like there's some of my co-hosts that I'm like, oh, they should like do like audiobooks. They have good voices. And like, I don't know, I'm always like looking at people's voices. Anyway, so we are here at the finale. We open where we left off. Quentin and Julia have arrived in Fillory. They do a thing to open a thing. And whose temple do they arrive in, Dominic?
Oh my gosh, it's me.
You get such a good entrance. I love that Embers Entrance is a little bit like intimidating, and then it's kind of like, oh hey, did you bring me little cakes? Like it's just like Ember for me feels very like kind of like a summation of the show where it's like almost intimidating looking god that could be like this like evil, menacing, whatever, who's just like actually this like chill fawn who's like, do you have snacks? I'm tired of eating rats. Like,
yeah, he's so interesting. He's relaxed and chill, but he's also so petulant and childlike himself. And it's such a joy to play. And the set that they have built for that first episode was so beautiful too. And it was a quick filming day. I thought it was going to be a long old filming day. And they were so efficient.
yeah,
They were so fast and so it felt like such a well-oiled machine at that point. Because sometimes you work in prosthetics and you're there 6 hours before call time, and then you're shooting for an 18-hour day, and they can really spread into long days. But this was always very streamlined.
yeah, and this isn't like sci-fi shows don't always look so great. And I feel like this show always does. And that is surprising. Like, I feel like they did a lot with the budget they had. Like all the set designs, all the costume designs were always like beautiful. And, a lot of, his podcast started as a Buffy podcast. Buffy, those first few seasons, and even the later seasons, that some of that stuff looks really rough. And I feel like The Magicians is one of those, like, they did a good job, like, not trying to overshoot. I don't know if this makes it, like, they did a good job not trying to overshoot their budget. They worked within the budget, and everything, even going back now, still looks, like, pretty fucking great. Which it is wild. This first season, Lev, was, like, 10 years ago?
Was it actually 10 years ago? It feels like 10-ish years ago. It feels like another
It might be 9. But yeah, and I do not feel like that is normally the case for like supernaturally type shows. But I think, and I don't know, you two could probably speak to this better than May or I could. They use a lot of practical effects, right? I feel like that's maybe why it looks still so good, right?
I'm sure that's part of it. I know that they worked technically on the set to do as much stuff practically as they could, as opposed to to do it digitally. Is that the opposite of practically? And it does give everything a kind of classic feel, and a very sort of tactile, very real kind of feel.
Yeah, I was thinking about this because I just happened to catch, I forget which one of the original Star Wars trilogies on TV, and I was like, it is wild that this still I mean, you know, some of it does look rough, but like that original trilogy still mostly holds up. And I was even reading this is probably old news, but the land speeders, that actually was something that they were on that was like moving, and they just used mirrors underneath of them as like to hide all that. And I don't think I knew that. And that's like pretty impressive. And I do not think if that was a movie done now, it would not be done that way. They would just do like, we'll do it all digitally.
Yeah.
And that's why, you know, a lot of that original trilogy, the stuff still does hold up. I gotta ask you, Lev, about Julia. So Julia's story is very different from the books. Well, not that different, just more expedited, I guess, than it is in the books. What do you think about what we do with Julia here? It really like always hurts my feelings watching like Julia's arc, because she gets shit on a lot. I'm curious what you think about her arc, especially in this season.
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, they did a smart thing by Julia's arc unfolds in the books. It unfolds in the second book, and it is actually contemporaneous with the first book. We just don't see very much of this stuff happening. And I think they did a smart thing in placing those two arcs, bringing her arc forward, and carrying it out in the first season. That was a good thing. If I had understood Julia as a character properly when I was writing the first book, I probably would have done it the same way. But I didn't figure her out until the second book, and it's painful. It's painful to watch. I sometimes think, well, I wonder if, in terms of the books, I sometimes wonder if I would write it the same way now. And I don't know the answer to that, to be honest.
I feel like I like that you're very upfront, Lev, and I love that you're like, yeah, I probably would have done that in the book. Like, I feel like you say that a lot, and that's an author who can be like, yeah, maybe I would have done that differently. I very much appreciate it. I think about that all the time, and I'm not a well-published author, like, and just like an essay I wrote, I'd be like, oh, I should have done that differently. Maybe I could have written this differently. And I do think there's a lot of credit to Stella's acting as well. May and I were talking about this, right? May, like, Stella sells the like horror and trauma and like just like terribleness of everything happening to her. She has a very good scream. She's very good at like horror movie type screams. And
it's a hard episode to watch. When I originally started watching the show back in 2018, I was in kind of a weird place. I was like staying up late when my now ex-wife was going to bed and watching the show by myself. And when I got to this episode and we get the reveal of what really happened to Julia, I just broke down crying, and I cried through the rest of the episode. And then when it ended, I was like, I need a break. And then I didn't start season 2 until 2021. So it was like 2.5 years of having to take a break from the show before I felt okay to come back to it.
I mean, since then, I think it's become only more common to depict sexual violence in TV. Certainly, it felt very shocking, even for me, to watch it on screen.
Yeah, I definitely did not expect that. I actually, because there's so much that happens in Magicians, even though it's like that and Buffy are my favorite shows, Magicians, I get my timelines mixed up. So in my brain, I didn't think this reveal happened till later. I forgot that it was like here that we learn what happened. And yeah, this show reminds me, I mean, I feel like I said this before, but it's like it reminds me of a more adult Buffy where like they can curse, they can show lots of blood and gore, and they, this is very horror movie, right? Like, and May, you're a horror gal like me, and I feel like you're more of a horror expert than I am, right? This felt like horror movie level, like shit, right?
It felt somewhere between horror movie and like erotic thriller with the way it's handled, with someone just invading someone else's space and tricking them into something. And that's part of why it's so horrifying, is that all of these people were opening themselves up to love and trust and what they thought was going to be a gift. And to have it turned around on them, for most of them to be murdered, and then for Julia to be assaulted like that, it's just that makes the horror of it twofold.
Yeah,
it's quite rushed on the show. I think that was one thing that that was a sacrifice that they ended up making by compressing so much plot into that first season. Basically, the plots of the first 2 books, a lot of them unfolded in one season. You don't quite get to prepare dramatically and emotionally for this disaster as much as you do in the books, and it feels. I don't know if it's harder or easier because it's a bit rushed. I expected them to string it out, over another season. So we were, I don't know, more emotionally able to process what happens, but it comes at you really fast.
Yeah, and I also did like the aspect of like I thought this was a good moment for Marina, a good way to show like, yeah, she's bad, but she's not like evil. Like she sees this like woman who she doesn't really like, who was assaulted, and she is going to help her.
Right.
Because like, the other big memory of Marina is her murdering Katie's mom. So you're kind of like, oh, she's a monster. But I do like showing like the like shock in her face when she sees Julia and she's like, yeah, I'm going to help you. I always appreciate layers to a character where it's like, yeah, they're an asshole, but they will help when it comes down to like something really serious. They'll help. And I like that she doesn't say anything shitty. She's not being sarcastic. She's just like, she's horrified and is like, yeah, I'll help.
It's like anytime Penny turns around to help as well, when he goes from being sarcastic asshole Penny to just being like, okay, we're going to get this done.
Yeah. 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 Like when he saves Quentin and like gets stabbed for him. I always love that. Like that feels, I don't know. I feel like everything I love where it's like the Magicians or like Buffy or Scream or X-Men. It's like all of those things. It's like some of the villains, they're kind of villains, but they also will help if it's something terrible.
It's a terrific performance. Both Penny and Marina, that the characters feel it makes sense. They don't feel as though they're breaking character when they turn around and behave decently. It all feels of a piece. Marina is in my top 3 characters that I didn't write that are in the Magician's show.
I read your books. I read back to back, and I think I read them. I can't remember if it was right before or right after season 1. Like it was like almost, because I remember seeing the reviews and like it must have been back to back before the show, because I saw the reviews and that was when I bought the first book. So I always like mush. I'm like, wait, who was in the book and who was in the show? Like I'll like mix up, and I was like, I can't remember Marina, but she probably was in the book. I did not realize she was completely not in the book. Because like in the first book, Julia's only in that one scene where she's upset that she didn't get in, right?
She shows up 3 times in the first book. But it's real blink and you missed it stuff. Yeah, so it's nice to have her, properly in it from the beginning.
Yeah. So we get Quentin does the flashback, and I like the show is always very meta. He's like, I'm going to do that thing I kind of hate where the book rewinds to fill in all the blanks. He basically gives us the previously on, and we see kind of how they got to Ember's temple, which is they see Martin, or they meet Jane. They find out they are the fool and the witch. This and the books with I think time travel can be a tough one to do in stuff that isn't full on sci-fi, I think. And I think the Magicians does it well, which is impressive. Like it's confusing, but it makes sense. Like it's like, you got to think about the timeline, but then once you do, it's like, yeah, sure. The Watcher woman was able to move through time. Sure. That's all you really need to know. I even think of, I'm sure you're not a big superhero guy, Lev, but like in the Avengers, I love the Endgame and Infinity War, but in Endgame, they break their own time travel rules. They set their own time travel rules, break their own time travel rules, and then it doesn't make sense if you think about it too much. Other than just like, think about there's no rules. And here, it's like, it does make sense. We even see, I think in the previous episode, the librarian calls Margo Janet. So it's like, oh, this time she's Margo, not Janet. And I like that shit is like, I don't know. I really, really like that. And it feels like the time travel was well thought out. I'm curious what you think, Lev.
It's something that it's downplayed in the book. Time travel is something of a storytelling crutch. And I sort of felt like, okay, I'm gonna do it because this is how the story makes sense. But I'm not going to lean into it. I'm going to gloss over it. But John and Sarah, it's one of their signature moves is to lean into the shit that I try to gloss over. And make a feature out of the bug. And they really lean into it and think it through in this very compelling way. And they do that nice. What's that? There's an episode. Isn't it? Is it in Deep Space Nine where they go back to the Trouble of the Tribbles?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I think
which led to them remastering the original series in HD.
Right. I did not know. Unintended consequences. But that was in the back of my mind, I think, when I was writing the book, and I'm sure they were thinking about it as well. They made a good thing about it. I don't know why you would say that you're sure that I'm not a big superhero guy. I am a big superhero guy. Huh. So I'll just leave that. I'll leave that there. But
most of my author friends are not big superheroes. That's the only reason I said that. Usually, most of my author friends are like, "Yeah, it's all right."
Yeah, no, I love superheroes, and I only I haven't done much superhero stuff in part because I have a twin brother who's a writer, and he did a whole couple of novels about superheroes, and then it turned out that makes it that their superheroes are his, and he has dibs on them. So,
so you have dibs on fantasy.
That's how it works, incidentally, in the literary world.
When I found that out on Twitter, I was like, "Wait, holy shit! I love that book." I never even occurred to me that you two were related because I worked at Barnes and Noble for on and off altogether. I think it's something like 16 years of my life I worked at Barnes and Noble. And, there's plenty of books that have the same title or even authors that have the same exact name, but aren't related. So it never even occurred to me that like, oh, I'd read 2 books by people with the same last name. They might be related. I never made that connection because I do love Soon I Will Be Invincible. That was my staff rec for a very long time after I read it at work.
Well, if you love that, you will love the sequel, which has just been released in the UK, and presumably will come out here at some point, but I don't know when.
And that's a long time between, right? I want to say the first one came out when I first worked at Barnes & Noble, like maybe 2008, 10, something like that.
I don't know why he waited so long. I think he just really wanted to get it right, and so he spent a lot of time with it. Anyway, it's a digression.
Yeah. Yes.
Love superheroes. The time travel stuff, I think they did it very, very well. I think it's one of the things you can do when you have a room full of writers talking things over between them. It's so hard to think that stuff through without creating plot holes when you're just alone in your study, I feel like. But if you hammer it out with a whole bunch of people in the room who can all spot the problems and work around them, it's much easier to do that very intricate stuff, which they ended up doing very well.
Yeah. No, my one unpublished fiction book has a little bit of time travel, and even then I'm always like, oh god, does it make it just I wrote it before I watched The Magicians, but it has just a little bit of a time loop in it, and I'm always like, is that too off-putting for people? But then I see shit like this where it's done well, and I'm like, okay, if it's done well and not the main plot point, it can work. I don't know.
I just also love Dean Fogg being like, you always bring up that goddamn movie when Quentin mentions Groundhog Day.
That is another thing I do like is that which leads us to the season 3 premiere, but the fact that we do get a lot of pop culture references, but also get them in front of magical creatures that do not understand the pop culture references. And I kind of love that was a thing that Buffy did really well, but also Buffy didn't always have the monsters be the the fuck are you talking about? Like on Buffy, it'd be everyone knew. And I kind of like that it's like the magical creatures, of course, have no reference for, whatever movie they're referencing because they wouldn't have seen it. And I always enjoy that. And then it, culminated in the pop culture speak moment in season 3, which I love. So we learned that the Watcher woman is Jane Chatwin, which I also like that, earlier Quentin had said that the Beast was never in the books. The books are made for kids. So of course there wouldn't be this like murderous monster. And then we learned that the villain in the books, who's the Watcher woman, is actually not. Actually, now that I'm saying this, because Jane does say she was stronger than the original Watcher woman, is it supposed to be that this was the Watcher woman in the books, or there was a different, the one in the books was the villain and then Jane just became her?
You'd have to ask Sarah John for the definitive
answer. As I'm saying it, I'm like, wait a minute, I don't think that, it's not supposed to be, it was always her.
I always assumed it was always her.
Yeah.
And it was always because of time magic.
Okay. That's what I took it as. She freezes time. She tells Quentin that there's like a patch over Julia's mind. It was made in haste. Take care of him. And then very easily like snaps and they're in the current timeline. They get that little note from Elliot.
I love that it just hits Quentin in the face. It's so cute.
I love it. And I love this. Margo's being such a bitch. Love Elliot. Because I would absolutely be the Margo if I'm stuck in a magical like realm with talking animals and I can't like access my phone. I would become a nightmare. I would also not be appropriately dressed for a quest, like Margo says she's not. I would, May, I feel like you would do better than I would, May.
I mean, I'd probably not be appropriately dressed, but I would likely have practical shoes on because heels just don't agree with my legs these days. And I'd be okay not having a phone as long as I could talk to the bunnies, which I know we haven't really established yet. But, I would love to pick up a bunny and be like, hey, go tell Elliot this. I think that would be adorable.
I do wonder what my childhood pug would have said if I could talk to him. Probably just would have wanted food. Been like, is there more food? Can I have more food? When are we napping? And, I love that when they arrive at the bar, we do get them drinking with the bulldog.
Mm-hmm.
Which, like, I don't think we fully delve into those animals until, like, season 3, I think. But I like that it's always there. It's always the animals. When they have the one where they're talking about when Quentin's telling them about Jane first getting to Fillory and it was a dog. No, it was a weasel. No, it wasn't. Like, it was just a talking animal that she encountered. Lev, tell me about the talking animals.
Well, it's a trope. I've always been strongly influenced by that moment in one of the Hitchhiker's Guide books where Arthur Dent is he's stuck on a planet and he's got a lot of time on his hands, so he learns to speak the language of the birds, and then he discovers that the birds, all they talk about is like wind shear, and various varietals of different nuts and berries, and it's incredibly they're not singing profound truths at all. They're incredibly boring, and that always stayed with me because it seemed so true. One of those Douglas Adams moments, but for he just does a throwaway, but it becomes, a major plot point because you can unpack so much out of it. I realized, animals actually they just think like animals. They think about animal stuff. So I never got tired of that particular joke.
I've actually been, this might be a judgment, might cause a judgment on me, but I've been like, I rotate shows as like my background nighttime shows. Like, and usually it's like a stupid cartoon. That's like my favorite thing as like, if I'm writing, my ADD is if I'm writing, I need my headphones in with music and then also a TV show playing. And then like all of the noise makes me able to concentrate. Rick and Morty has been like rotated into that of like background nighttime cartoons. There's an episode where could not tell you it's like a throwaway gag in the episode where Marty gets a little thing where he can understand animals. And that is the joke where like he listens to the birds and they're just talking about like need to get food. Oh, need the pollen. Oh, blah, blah, blah. And just like very fast talking. And all the animals are boring except for the squirrels that are plotting like world domination. And then they're like, that boy's looking at us like he can hear us. And then they start following him. whatever. But so I was thinking of that with this. I'm like, I wonder what that dog said while they were drinking. Like, I would have liked to see what that dog had to say. Was he also drunk? Margo is not happy that Julia is there. Julia's, you cannot like me. And Margo says, oh, we won't. Which I love.
Quentin says, we worked it out. And Julia goes, I'm here. You don't have to like me. And Margo says, good, I don't. Or something like that. And it's just so perfect. It's such a perfect little encapsulation of their three characters.
Yeah. Yes, it really is. They go to the knife maker, which Julia and Quentin had gone to in the past, in Fillory. And they all need to get their hands cut to see who is the king. And I do love that it's Elliot. I love that it's Elliot. He's the perfect choice. And I love that the speech he gives to Margo, which makes sense, where he's like, I am so miserable and unhappy. This is something that will at least give me, something to do, some like purpose. And I really like that. I also like that it's the gay character that has to marry, Fen, the knife maker. I like that.
It is funny. I forgot that Fen is played by a different actor in this episode and has 0 lines.
Yeah. I will say, Fen as a character took me a while to warm up to, but then by the end, I did like absolutely love her.
As soon as Brittany Curran shows up as Fen, I was just like, oh, I'm all in on this character. I love her. She's great.
That was a character that Fen actually exists in the books, but she's a completely different person, and she sort of 3/4 of the way through the first book, she gets stepped on by a giant glowing god and dies immediately. Clearly, it was a waste of a character in the books, and they spared her from being stepped on in the show and did wonderful things with her.
I love Penny saying that'll make him easier to live with. But then we cut to one of my favorite scenes, which is it's like a quieter scene between Margo and Elliot. I reference this scene all the time because I'm always interested in writing the like way friendship stories are told. And I say this all the time, but Margo and Elliot are like maybe the best gay guy, straight girl dynamic friendship I've ever seen in a show. I mean, it doesn't hurt that both those actors, Summer and Hale immediately have such great chemistry. They, Summer has told me they are friends outside of, that they became like pretty close. And maybe you can, I don't know if you'll agree with me or Dominic, like sometimes in that dynamic in TV shows, one of them is the like clown and one of them is the more straight talker. And there isn't a clown in this relationship. And that's what I really love about it.
They supplant that by making Quentin the fool in any of his relationships. So he gets to be the clown. But this particular relationship, which is this beautiful, they still have romantic love for each other. And I think that's why it's so powerful, is it's not just platonic. They have romantic love for each other and they understand where each other's boundaries are in this innate way where they can be together and they're best friends, but they can also fuck and you can still be like, okay, yeah, they're still just best friends. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Dominic, you could probably speak to this, but I always watching them, I always feel as though, here are these two really skillful, strong-willed actors, and I see one of them do a line reading, and then I see the other one, and it's a little bit sort of like, could you top this? Or I'm going to set this up in such a way. What are you going to do with this? And then the other one, responds and takes it somewhere else. I feel as though there's this great sort of duetting going on between them.
Yeah, I think it's, a gift as an actor when you have someone, they say that acting is reacting. And when you have that dynamic and someone who can play with you and push you and surprise you, it lifts and elevates your performance as well, because it wakes you up and it ignites something, and it becomes this like, I don't know what's coming next, and it is this electricity, and yes, both Summer and Hale, I think together they are a wonderful pairing, and to speak as a gay actor, roles that rich and dynamic don't come along all that often, because you do become a trope, or you do become the best friend who just says snippy things. But it's not that. It's
Yeah.
rich, and it's deep, and it's well considered, and yeah, they are a perfect pair together.
Yeah, it's funny. What both of you just said about that is a lot of the interviews I've done for folks that were on Buffy have kind of said that about Sarah Michelle Gellar, that like she never messed up a line, and she always made you want to be a better actor because she would give you so much in the scenes together. And I could definitely see that with these two as well, like both of them being at top tier, and it's like, oh well, then I'm going to give you top tier because you're giving me top tier. Yeah, and I just don't see that kind of friendship love that often in stuff like this. And I mean, May, I know you said that I don't consider it romantic, but I do see what you're talking about. It's not romantic in the way that they want to be together as
Right.
more than like best friends. Yeah.
As someone who's poly and has a very unique relationship with her best friend, I would say that we're in this weird space between romantic and platonic, where we buy each other gifts all the time, we fall asleep on each other, we do all of these things. And like I wear this ring set every day that she gave to me after we stopped being romantic partners. And there's so many different kinds of love in the world, and I really love that Margo and Elliot have one of those unique kinds of love, because you don't see that on shows, you don't see that in movies.
I specifically reference the fact that Margo is able to say, I hate that you're getting married, you're the only one I like.
Yeah.
Because I feel that really hard sometimes, like if a best friend, no matter who it is, it's going to change your dynamic, right? Even if it's not your best friend, if it's someone that you hang out with a lot, someone maybe get drinks with at happy hour a lot, once they get married, it will change a little bit. Whether it's, oh, I have to bring my partner, or I don't do that anymore, it does. And being the one that is not coupled can be a little like, well, shit, now it's going to change for me. And like, I love you so much, and I don't want our dynamic to change. That is always like the kind of writing I want to do, is like a friendship love about something like that. I don't know. That's the dynamic I'm always interested in. I don't think I've seen it done as easily, or seemingly as easily as I have seen it here, where like two friends are just like, I really love you. Well, I love you too. And now it's going to change a little bit, and that might suck, but and the way she cries just a little bit, I don't know. I like that. Dominic, I'm curious. What do you as also a gay man? What do you think?
Like I said, I met Matt while I was working on The Magicians, and I hadn't really had a long-term relationship for a long while before that. And then, you meet people in LA, and you're fast friends, and I think it's a universal feeling that so many people can attach to. Because a lot of people have been in that position of feeling left behind when their friends and loved ones find someone, and it's not coming from a place of selfishness of like, no, I don't want that for them, I'm going to ruin it. Sorry to go American again. um, um, but it is a sadness. It's a lot. It is a form of loss that, whatever traditions you have, it's like, oh, this is a Film Friday. We'll go to Blockbuster Video. I'm showing my age on a Friday night and pick out videos. That
I
then
miss
all of a sudden,
Blockbuster.
then you mourn that loss for that friendship or whatever that relationship is. And so I think it's an easily accessible feeling for so many people to get on board with, whether you're straight or gay or wherever you land on the spectrum. It's a universal feeling.
That is true. It is universal. Yeah. I feel like I always relate it to the queer experience only because it's like, oh, all my straight friends are the one getting married. But you are right. It's not just for queer folks. I mean, Margo is the non-queer one in this pairing, and she's the one that is more upset.
I mean, is she?
Right. There is a reading of her that is not, but I feel like she would say that she is straight. Elliot then says she must be his best man. Everyone devises a plan. The bit with the knife and Penny coming up to grab it and it burning his hand. He's like, God, I hate this place. I love because it's like he's so tired of the whimsy. He's like so like I think Margo says this later on in the show, and she's like, the fairies and their whimsical bullshit. Like I kept thinking of that line, and like Penny's so caught off guard and he's so annoyed. I love that. And so they devise a plan. Margo and Penny and Alice and Josh are going to the invisible castle because Elliot has to de-virginize his new bride.
And impregnate.
Right.
There's a lot of semen in this episode.
We learn that the castle is invisible, and that's gotta be a like meta joke, right? When they're like, well, budgetary constraints, right? Like the show probably is referencing itself not having the budget for another castle.
It's like in Monty Python when they see Camelot and then somebody says,
yeah. But Julia and Quentin go to see who, Dominic?
It's me. Hello, it's Ember.
He asks if they've brought what? Because he's tired of eating rats.
Little cakes. And it is any time now that I'm near a dessert, I think about it. Anytime there's cupcakes, anytime it's now become, part of my psyche. Anytime I see any kind of a dessert beverage.
I have funfetti mix on the counter in my kitchen because I'm going to be baking soon. And just when I was watching the episode, I was like, I wish I had these ready.
Yeah, it's sort of, it's sort of leaked into my lexicon of language, even when the strikes were going on and the Magicians cast and crew had a sort of little get together outside CBS Radford. One of my signs was "Have you bought me little residuals?" So it's still permeating in. Yeah, it still gives. I have to apply. Anytime I'm talking and I'm suddenly looking off into the distance, it's because one of my cats, Pippin, gets a little destructive when he's hungry, and so if I'm fading in and out of camera, it's to stop things from coming off shelves and shredding.
Dominic, I did assume that it was your cats. I was like, he's looking at his cats.
It feels appropriately whimsical.
It does, yeah. Anytime someone's like looking off camera, it's because either they have a kid and their kid's doing something, or they have an animal and the animal is doing something that they're like, you gotta stop. I've had people where their cat is very like attached to them, so they'll come up on screen and like be rubbing their face while they're on camera.
No, just destructive.
What Ember tells them that he is basically trapped there, but not in a way where like. Not in a way you would. It's just like he knows that he'll be defeated, right? It's if I go out, the beast will kill me, so I'm just staying here eating rats. Dominic, I am curious. What's your take on it? Because Quentin kind of is like, oh, you're being a whiny bitch. But I do kind of get if Ember's like, if I go out there, I'm just gonna die. So why bother going out there? Like, I don't know. I'm curious your take on him.
Oh gosh, what would Dominic do? Probably hide. Probably stay at home and just watch movies. Yeah, again, I think it's that universal thing of fight or flight. I know I'm not a fighter myself, and then also I guess Ember does feel this burden of he's created things so many times, and where's his brother in all this, and and like yeah, I get him, and it's nice to play and relish in that selfishness too as an actor, to not be the noble one, to not be the heroic, like, well, I'll ride out on the third day, look for me coming over the hill. it's nice to be selfish and petulant. I think I'm with Ember.
So technically, it's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, and I guess we could say he's
Oh,
fawning.
yeah.
Oh, I'll see myself out now.
May, what's your take on Ember?
I totally understand why he is hiding. It makes a lot of sense. If you know that no matter what your actions are, they're going to result in defeat, then why would you try? And like you just said, Dominic, as someone who has held the burden of knowing you helped create this place and you helped maintain it, the responsibility of then having to also defend it from this all-powerful being, essentially, it feels like too much. It feels like why even try? And I kind of love that because Quentin makes it there for the first time out of all of these time loops, Ember starts to see it a little bit differently. He's like, oh, this has actually changed a bit. Maybe I can actually do something to help it succeed. And
By providing
I do,
largesse.
yes, I do love that Quentin calls him a whiny bitch. Yeah, well, what did they use for that? Because it looks real.
I have no idea. Hats off to the props department.
For real, because when Alice drinks that, I kind of gag a little bit every time, especially because she drinks the whole thing, and I'm like, that looks so realistic.
Yeah.
Listen, I feel like that's the way you got to do it. If it's like a gross jar of it, just like you got to do it quickly.
Oh, yeah.
Like a terrible shot.
Did you just
but I think
that whole thing?
there is a part of Ember that is he does think he's being helpful and nice when he unblocks Julia. He thinks that's a gift. He thinks like, oh, you're blocked. Here you go. What a gift. Take care. Bye. And he doesn't understand the ramifications of
Clever girl.
yeah. I'm so sorry, but he doesn't understand the gravity of that. And so I love it. He's so complex, and there is an innocence to him, but he's messed up.
That's the thing I also really like about Ember is like he's a little selfish, but his intentions, he's not like you said, he does think he's helping, right? There's not like ill intentions by giving Julia back her memory. He genuinely is like, oh, there's a blockage. Let me fix that for you. I can do that. Mm-hmm. And like, I kind of appreciate the like God of it all, where it's like he's so far removed from actually talking to like real people that he doesn't quite get fully what's going on or like what is helpful and what is not helpful, because arguably the semen is helpful, but the unblocking the memory is not helpful. Lev, I need to know your reading on Ember. What do you think of the character?
I mean, it's a different character from in the books, but in a really fun way. They always take things further in the show than I did in the books. You know, in this case, I was starting with Aslan from the Narnia books, and you know, it felt very naughty, kind of having a go at Aslan because Aslan is such a sacred, a revered icon.
Because Aslan is the one that is like he's supposed to be like God, right? Or Jesus, one of those two.
He's
Jesus, right? Okay,
yeah.
And yet, I always had complicated feelings about him because everybody loves Aslan, and yet also Aslan's very powerful, and yet he allows some sort of messed up shit to happen in Narnia, where you sort of think afterwards, wait a minute, if you really were Jesus line, could you surely you could have stopped that? And he has a self-indulgent and narcissistic quality, which I leaned into a little bit in the books, but they took that wonderful strain of looseness of him and really just spun it out in all kinds of pleasing directions. I always thought that one of the Thor movies, Russell Crowe is doing Zeus. Is it Love and Thunder? I can't remember.
Yeah, Love and
He's
Thunder.
got a little Ember in him in that.
Yes.
I thought it was. Ember is one of the great things that John and Sarah did in transforming the books into the show, and made me wish that I'd gone at him a little harder. But at the time, Aslan seemed so sacred. It was sort of like, how far can I go with this? And when in the books, when it comes out that Aslan is kind of hiding or trapped, or Ember is, it's a horror movement. It's what we call in the literary parlance an oh shit moment. When you think of Ember, he's the god of this world. He's all powerful, and then it's like, oh fuck, he's afraid of something. How it must be something unbelievably terrible. But they play it much more as a character moment in the show, which is a great thing.
Yeah, and Ember is always like a joy to watch on screen, which is a lot of thanks to your acting, Dominic.
Oh, thank you.
Ember just always is fun. Not to spoil anything, season 4 is maybe my favorite appearance of his, when he has the back and forth with Margo. Yeah,
Margo.
I love the their dynamic there.
Yeah. And Summer is wonderful to play, to speak back to Hale and Margo's dynamic. Summer is such a dynamic, fun performer that I think I worked with almost I think the only actor I didn't work with directly out of the core cast was Arjun, but I think throughout the course of the show, I worked with everyone. And yeah, they were all wonderful and giving and warm.
But Dominic, to your credit, even such a small character is so memorable, and it's because I feel like you went big, but not so big that it felt ridiculous. It felt ridiculous in the context of that universe. It didn't feel out of ridiculous for the show. It felt like this tracks with the show's ridiculousness. If that makes sense.
It's I think that there's something freeing working in prosthetics. That you can allow yourself to move a little bigger and be a little broader. And then, I don't know, I guess classical training and having studied Shakespeare and performed classically, that sort of language sort of comes in there where it's just a little bit heightened. It's almost a little theatrical. But yeah, it's a joy to play, and I guess that sometimes bleeds out onto the screen is when you can tell that performers are having fun. It sort of comes through, I think.
I mean, you saying that you had a background in Shakespeare. We talk about Star Trek a lot when talking about the magicians, and I feel wasn't it TNG that a lot of that cast? I know at least Patrick Stewart had backgrounds in Shakespeare, right? That they had backgrounds in theater, and I feel sometimes that really does translate well for genre stuff, because you can bring the capital A actorness to it, but still adapt to the material and what the universe is.
Yeah, I think sometimes I love, me, I love genre stuff. I love Buffy, I love The X-Files, I love Twin Peaks, I love Star Trek, and I think it's easy for people to dismiss that or be like, oh, okay, yeah it's that. But, if you take it back to Shakespeare and you've got Midsummer Night's Dream and you've got all these fantastical elements and, you have to ground it and you have to believe it and you bring it to screen. And I think it's true what people say that, if you can grasp Shakespeare, then you can grasp Klingon, and you haven't heard Klingon unless you've heard it in, but you do Shakespeare, and then you can get to grips with medical jargon, and you go and do Grey's Anatomy, and it's a foundation that I think lets you then go and play. All that to say, I love genre stuff. I love genre.
Dominic, I'm going to be quoting, if you understand Shakespeare, you can understand Klingon. I'm going to use that.
Oh, do. What is that? Is it Star Trek 6, right? It's Undiscovered Country.
Yeah,
where
Undiscovered Country. Yeah. Christopher Plummer recites some Shakespeare in Klingon.
And it's funny how many fantasy tropes originate in Shakespeare, because he does have so much magic. And the epigraph from the magicians comes from the Tempest, because there is so much magic and wizardry in Shakespeare. And it migrates into modern fantasy, whatever that is.
I mean, it makes sense. Like as a teen, Hamlet was my favorite because it felt like a horror movie. Because it's like he sees the ghosts, Ophelia's going crazy, and then it ends in a bloodbath where everyone dies. Like I thought that was like, to me, I was like, wow, that's so like Shakespeare kills everyone at the end. That's like so edgy, and I thought that was like very like I didn't care. Romeo and Juliet, I was like, man, romance, but like, oh, give me a bloodbath with ghosts, and I'm like here for it. So then they devise their plan. They get to the dungeon. They find out someone else is in the dungeon. They all meet back up at where they're staying, and we learn who is the second person they got, May.
They've got Christopher. Is it Christopher Plover?
Yeah.
Christopher Plover, the author of the Fillory and Further books, pedophile extraordinaire.
I love the way this is written, where it's like, this is a character they need help from, but they also know that he is this like terrible pedophile. And like, was Quentin's hero until he learned about like actually what happened. And I just like the decision to do that, because it's like, oh, but they still do need this guy's help, but he's also like this terrible person. And I don't know, there's something about that I can't think of another thing where it's like, other than like, I mean, I know murder is also bad, but like that is something we encounter a lot in genre where it's like, that person's a murderer, but now they need their help. Sure. But something where it's like someone who did something this kind of terrible. I don't know. I like this show and the books kind of like turn a lot of those tropes on their head, right? Where it's like, sure, there can be like a author that they look up to that like kind of sucks, but usually it's not this. Kali Rocha, who played Halfrek in Buffy, said that when she worked with Sarah Ramirez on, I think, Grey's Anatomy, that like Sarah Ramirez said like, oh, when I think you're going to go left, you go right. And I feel like this show, I think about that a lot with this show. Like when I think we're going to go left, we go right, and we take a totally different turn. Lev, if you can, what do you think of Christopher Plover? Because you wrote this before certain authors were learned to be terrible people. And I'm curious, like I'm curious how that went about. What was your, and I don't remember, Christopher Plover, was this in the books? I don't remember this being in the books.
It's another case of a single line.
Okay.
It's almost a throwaway in the books.
Okay.
It's one sentence where it's revealed that Christopher Plover, was a pedophile.
Okay.
And I remember writing it and thinking, it was just one sentence. I was thinking, maybe I should take it out. No, let's leave it in. And I think, at the time, it was probably more original at the time to kind of travesty some of these sort of sacred fantasy texts. Now, dark academia is a whole genre now.
Yeah.
That's when I was writing Magicians. So the idea that this basically C.S. Lewis stand-in was a pedophile seemed radical and really subversive. And then as one has the luxury to do on television when there are just so many more hours, there's so much more space, Saranton unpacked it and, really kind of opened a window onto this little horror world that one sentence kind of implied. And they did an amazing job with it. And the actress did an amazing job with making it feel sort of grounded and present. It was an interesting, fascinating thing to watch them do.
Yeah. And I mean, that actor is great because he still, it's he's Mr. Sheffield from The Nanny, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like he presents as like this like nice, British dude. And like I think I like that it's not like he's this like evil twisty mustache dude. Right. It's like, no, he is presenting as like, if this is someone you met, you would think, oh, that's like just like this nice British guy who's a children's author, and you wouldn't know this like dark shit about him. And that is something that I also appreciate, because it would have been very obvious to make him just like this, like he presents as this like, like terrible, scary guy, but he doesn't. And that for me makes it more, I don't know, brings like more layers to it, because I'm always interested in, I say this a lot with horror movies. if the person being like killed or whatever is like a bad person, I don't care as much, right? Like if it's like Halloween ends, whatever, however anyone thinks about it, the thing that bothered me most was all the people Michael Myers or Corey, then Michael Myers stalked were people that like were bad. And it's like, we presented all the, like the doctor was like this like shitty sexually harassing his employees doctor. And the nurse was like trying to get the other Allison fired. And it's like, I don't care as much if that's all that's being killed. But I like the idea of like, this was Quentin's hero. He was at first presented as like this, like, nice older guy. And we learned that he is a piece of shit. And that's always more interesting to me than like, oh, they're like bad and they stay bad and they look bad and they fit all the like stereotypes of like bad. I'm always interested in that. It's the same thing with like, if there's a bad breakup in a story, I like when no one's fully wrong. Right. Like, I like when it's, you know what I mean?
It's also extra nuanced because he doesn't think he did anything wrong.
Yes.
When he says our connection, when he's talking about Martin, and he has that look of like pleasure wash over his face, it is so unsettling.
Yeah.
Because he really does not think he did anything wrong. And he has no ownership over the fact that, yeah, Martin may have had some kind of darkness in him innately, but he became who he became because of Plover.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And you're right. And he says that, right? He says like, oh, the Fillory took away his humanity. And it's like,
did it? Or did you do that?
Like, and yeah, no, May, that's a really good point. The way he says the connection, it's like, oh God, this like Grossman really thinks that like they had something, I guess. I like the idea of like I said, murderers, we do that all the time in genre where it's like, yeah, I got to work with this murderer. That happens all the time, but not like something like this. And he does have useful information for them, right? Like to help them get to where they need to go. And I do like when Quentin's like, why don't we try that knife? Like, well, they decide to go to the wellspring. Quinn tells Alice that she should be the one to drink the semen because she is, what a sentence, because she is the stronger magician, right? He feels like he always wanted to be the chosen one, but it should be her because, and like, I don't feel like that's like arguably, right? Like the show has shown us she is the best magician to date of the group, right? Like she comes from a family of magicians. She, knew her shit in the first episode.
And it's a nice evolution for Quentin's character to acknowledge that he always wanted to be the one. He always dreamed of someone saying, Quentin Coldwater, you are the one. And he's realizing that that's not as important as doing the right thing and being part of the team that helps save the day. It doesn't need to be focused on him. And Lev, I spoke about this on earlier episodes in the season, but that's one of the reasons I love Quentin so much is that he's not special boy number one. He's just cute little queer Quentin who's doing his best. And I love that. And I love this moment for him as a character. And I think it's especially nice after all the shit that happened between him and Alice in the last few episodes. It's nice that he is saying like, hey, I am going to say you should do this because you are the best person for it. Not because I'm trying to get you to forgive me. Not because I'm trying to win you back, but because it makes the most sense.
That's Quentin. I mean, that's Quentin's journey, and you know his reward for understanding and accepting that it's not him, that he's not the chosen one, is that he can connect emotionally to Alice and to other people. That's what he gets by giving up that dream, and I hope it's clear that it's worth it. That's what he needs to do.
Yeah, and I that's another thing where, like, you know, again, think you're gonna go left, but you're gonna go right. Like, you don't expect the main character who has been, you know, suffering from depression all season, has been, you know, having trouble like getting it together with his relationship with Alice. And at this point, it's like, quote unquote, done, right? I even like that Alice is like, don't worry, I'm not going in mad at you. I still have your back. Like, she's not bringing to the table the fact of like their relationship. She understands like there is way more important shit going on than like our dynamic of like who cheated, who did terrible things, whatever.
There's
than,
no
like,
pettiness.
Yes. And I also appreciate that. Because I don't know. I might still be a little. I probably would have said like, "Yeah, I'll have your back. I still think you're an asshole. I don't like you." Like I probably would have had to have a dig. Alice and Quentin are very awkward, right? And they aren't good at expressing their emotions all the time. And I like that we get to this point where like they are very clearly expressing their emotions here, and kind of this is the most adult they're being about their feelings. I think, to your point, Lev, I do think that like pays off, right? I do think them being very frank with each other pays off in the long run for their relationship, wherever it goes later seasons. Alice downs the jar. I do like Margo saying, "Come on, hun, pretend it's prom night and you just want to shut him up." So they go to the wellspring. Oh no, this first Julia and Quentin talk and we kind of see what happened. I love the choice to shoot it still in like that beautiful, like sunlight, bright space, but show how fucking terrible it was. I do think that's, again, like really good horror movie choice with a really painful thing to watch. I think like making it look bright and like shiny and like positive is a really good decision. And I'm curious, May, what do you think about that?
I love the it's not a dark reflection of the memory. It is this very clear thing that happened. And I love all the little changes. So instead of milk coming out of all of those statues, it's blood. Instead of coins falling from the, not sky, but falling from somewhere, it's pieces of glass. Yeah. And it's so interesting that even with the patch Marina did, we haven't seen any of those other people around. And Katie hasn't said anything.
Yeah.
You know, we don't know what's going on with Katie. It's like putting on your glasses. Yeah. When you were looking at something before you put them on and it was unclear and there were all of these rounded edges to things, and then you put your glasses on and all of a sudden you can see everything clearly. And in this case, it is extremely painful and extremely upsetting. And I think it's like very effective.
Yeah. Very effective. Stella's acting is so great in the scene and so horrible to watch.
Yeah. And I love that we find out that, it's not Our Lady Underground. It's Renard the Fox, a trickster who was manipulating all of them the whole time. They didn't fuck anything up. They were deceived.
Yeah. And man, the way like slices into all the other people. Oof.
Yeah.
Possesses,
ripping out Mackenzie Aston's heart.
Possesses what's his face?
Mackenzie Aston is lovely, by the by. What a gentleman.
I'm sure.
Then we kind of like Quentin learns what happened. Then they go to the wellspring. They enter and it is Christopher Pulver's writing room. I do like Elliot. I wrote down the quotes. Elliot says, all that power and he can't stop thinking about where it happened. And Margo says, Fillory needs meds way more than it needs magic. Which I think was a very good line. And then almost immediately we get the really good, like the beasts like theme, that like throbbing noise, like music that like sends you into a panic. And we see like one single moth fly by Quentin's head. I gotta say, he is very intimidating. That actor is really good. The moths, it reminds me, I mean, again, the horror of it all, it reminds me of a horror movie monster because, right, it's like, we have seen this character be completely undefeatable every time we've seen him prior. He just will kill everything in his path. And, you know, the most they could do was send him back through a portal. That was like the defeat that they could do with him. So the like panic that sets in watching this, I remember the first time I watched this and I was like, how many minutes do we have left? Like, what? Like, I remember just being like, holy shit. And being like, maybe this is a dream. Maybe this isn't happening. That's why. And then, no, it is all happening. Lev, I am curious what you think of this as the ending for the season 1 finale. I'm not a fan of a cliffhanger, but I do kind of love this.
It's because I have a lot of feelings about it. It's a very TV way to tell the story. Novelists are always looking for that nice, rounded sense of closure, as if it's been, a pebble from a stream bed. It's just perfectly round and closed. And there's that TV impulse to just cut things off out of the really ragged, bleeding edge, and that's very much what they do. John and Sarah have a very sure feel when it comes to horror. I come from a fantasy background and kind of dabble in horror. They, I think, come much more from a horror background and dabble in fantasy. So they're on very sure footing when they do the scary stuff goes down, and they do it very well. My only complaint about the finale is that there is so much story, so much stuff happens. So there's so many things coming together and so many things paying off. But I think that final scene is very strong.
Yeah, it's brutal watching them all get killed. So Alice is bleeding out. Penny's hands are cut off. Margo and Elliot are just
the scream that Penny has when he's off screen is so upsetting because you never hear Penny exhibit any kind of admittance of pain or suffering.
Yeah, it's a really good beat. And Julia comes in, she has the knife. In my brain, I misremembered this because I think, not spoiler, I think this is said later, Alice hesitated, but it's not that she didn't have the knife. Julia had taken it from her. Right? That's what went wrong, is she goes for the knife and she doesn't have it.
Right.
And you kind of, eventually you don't quite know what's going on, but you do kind of feel, it's well, Julia, you should have done this before he killed all of them, but you do understand where she's coming from, right? She just remembered all of this terrible shit that happened to her.
Yeah.
And she understandably wants revenge. And she doesn't know the rest of this gang the way Quentin does, right? She hasn't spent the year with them at school. So it's kind of I feel like she would have been upset if Quentin had been murdered, right? But I feel like other than that, it's I don't know these people. They don't like me. I don't really like them.
Right.
I did write down, I was taking notes, and my 2 notes for here are fuck you, Martin, and what the fuck, Julia.
Yeah, she ends with what, she wants to make a deal with him, and then they teleport away. And as you mentioned, May. Oh, go ahead, Lev.
Right,
yeah.
It's just interesting mix. There's an interesting mix in this episode of bad people doing good things, and then good people doing bad things. They have a wonderful way of flip-flopping characters in that way that feels very real and authentic.
Yes, I remember having when I first watched Orange is the New Black, I had a critique that but some of the characters that I love are mean when they're in groups. And I remember someone saying to me, yeah, because that's real life. Some people are just can be good people, but are shitty when they're with certain people, or can be nasty sometimes. And it's oh, right. That real life isn't someone's 100% good all the time.
Wait a minute. Speak for yourself.
So I do like that. I do like in these last 2 episodes, we see more of Julia and Quentin's actual friendship rather than them just being at odds.
Very much so, yes.
Which kind of matches with the storytelling that they do, especially on the show with the magicians, where it's we start with we get 10 minutes of them being actual friends, and then they're at odds. And this is more seeing, in the previous episode, we got to see them under the table where they drew the maps, and it endears you more to their friendship, which is an odd way of telling their friendship, but I kind of like it. I like that at this point, it's oh, but now we've seen what good friends they are. Oh, fuck, now this terrible shit is happening. I like that. I don't know. But yeah, I guess that's where we end, is Penny screaming, his arms have been cut off, and everyone else is dead except for Quentin. I am the X-Files always drove me nuts because they always loved a cliffhanger. And it's really weird because I am normally averse. There's a lot of things this show does that are normal things that I normally am very vocal about hating, that because the show does it well. I'm usually very averse to any kind of horror-y type of sexual assault. But I do think they handle the stories with care. So it's okay, I mean, I still don't love it, but it's like, yeah, I get it. And the story does that. This show does that a lot, where it's like, oh, I don't normally love this type of whatever, but this show makes it work. And I think it's because they're always like turning it on their head. Like whatever you expect to happen is not what's going to happen. But yeah, we're at the end. What is your favorite scene, May?
I love the scene between Quentin and Alice when he is like, no, you should be the one doing this. I'm not the chosen one, and I need to learn to be okay with that.
Dominic?
Gosh, I'm just going to be selfish and just because it magicians changed. I'm engaged. So much of my life personally. I'm just going to be selfish. I'm going to be like Ember and be selfish and say like Ember's scene.
Not a bad choice. Lev, what would you say is your favorite part?
I agree with May. That's the scene that I was writing the whole book towards. It's a different version of it in the book, but I was happy. So I was very happy that emotional moment worked the same way in the show that it does in the book.
I actually love hearing you say that was what you were like writing towards, that you wanted, that was like your big. It makes me feel better because in my writing, and I'm not a published author, I publish on websites, but like I will be like, oh, I want this beat, and then I tend to write around like a beat that I really want. So yeah, I love hearing that. My favorite scene is the Margo and Elliot scene, just because, like, again, I don't think I've seen a friendship written so well about two people who like love each other so intensely, but are like best friends. And I loved Margo, who is like very severe, being able to be like, hey, this makes me like sad and like cry. What grade do we give the episode, Dominic?
Oh. Well,
Wait, are we not doing favorite outfit?
Oh, right. I've skipped favorite outfit. May, what is your favorite outfit?
So allow me to answer that by saying, ask someone else first so I can go grab it.
Oh.
I bet I know what she's going to grab. Okay, Dominic, what is your...
Well, I can't say Embers because Embers is just a dirty shirt. I mean, it's very comfortable. I think it's very hard to top anything other than what Margo wears. Other than what summer sports. She's always, look at this.
Yes, I have Alice's dress. It's not the one she actually wore. It is just the same dress, but I love this thing, and I would be wearing it if it wasn't so damn warm in my apartment.
Did you get that? Did you happen to have it, or did you get it because you liked it when you saw it?
So my friend Thea, who is also very into the magicians, she had it, and she was going through her closet and was like, hey, this doesn't fit me anymore. Do you want it? And I was like, why does that look familiar? She goes, oh, because Alice wears it on the magicians. I was like, fuck yes, I want it.
That's so cool. Lev, do you have a favorite outfit?
I usually make it on principle. I never answer this question because I'm not a clothes person. You would never know it from the sweaty Australian Open freebie I'm wearing currently. Though I always love Julia's outfits, especially in this one. I think she looks very chic and put together.
She does, yeah. No, I mean, I think the costuming on the show is very like stylish.
Yeah, I always feel aware of it.
I'm with May and Dominic. Margo's like neon purple jacket looks so good on her, and I love that black and white. Alice wears like those cute look. May, what do you call it? Because like there's a certain type of dress, right, that she wears.
Well, this one's different, but a lot of the time she wears dresses with like peasant collars.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's the word I was looking
and they
for.
suit her so well.
Yeah, she looks really good in like a dress. I don't know. Like I feel like that's what I think of when I think of Alice, is like her wearing her dress. Now, what grade do we give the episode, Dominic? I'm going to call back on you first.
Oh boy, gosh. Wait, hold on. Is it a number? It's grade A?
Yeah.
Say A. A solid A. A.
Lev?
I'm going to give it an A-, only so we have somewhere to go in the future. Don't interpret this as me finding fault with the episode. I'm just hedging my bets. It's a great episode.
Listen, the thing I liked is that you will be like, well, I do have a critique of this. That's why I do like having you on for these, because you'll be like, or like, oh, I didn't really write this, but I like that they translated this into this. Like, you have very much like, of course you're a little biased, but I feel like you like give an unbiased opinion of like the stuff when we're watching it. So I appreciate that.
Ambivalence, my brand.
May.
I'm also going to give it an A-. I feel like that final scene, while very effective, it feels a little bit rushed. And I wish we got a little bit more time with them interacting with Martin once he reveals his face and trying to figure things out. And I know season 2 is going to pick up right where it left off from what I remember, but I wanted a little bit more there. And not going to lie, I'm not just saying this because you're here, Dominic. I wanted more Ember.
Yay!
Yes, I do agree with that. I always take more Ember.
Yeah,
I think for the exact reasons everyone said, I go B+ because there's room to the room to like improve, or like the places we go that I know we go. So I think I go with B+. That ending is quite the fucking kicker of an ending, though, I will say. And I don't think many show. I feel like on this show, we see all those characters die like 8 different times. This season alone, we get 2 different times of all the characters dying. I think it's like a very good, shocking cliffhanger ending. Because sometimes shows, if I don't know, usually it's like, oh, someone got kidnapped, and I'm like, ugh. But this is like, ooh, all the main characters just got slaughtered. Where do you think they're going to go? Like, you don't know where they're going to go. So yeah, I think, yeah, it's good. Thank you all for joining me. I have had a lot of fun covering The Magicians. Lev, I have appreciated. You have been so fucking supportive and nice about it. I cannot thank you enough. Dominic, I love that you were like, hey, let me know when you want me to come on for an Ember episode as soon as you saw that we were covering this. And yeah, and May, it's been great having you. May only is a new co-host just for The Magicians. And yeah, this has been a lot of fun. If you liked Slayerfest 98, you can find us, you can watch most of our recordings are now video. You can watch them all on YouTube. You can subscribe to us. You can find the podcast audio on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere else you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media at SlayerFestX98. If you want to follow me, I'm at ENX Carlos. May, where can everyone find you and your other podcasts?
Did you drop your Patreon information?
Oh my gosh, May, you're more on this than I am. And also you can subscribe to our Patreon, where we're going through X-Men the Animated Series, Batman the Animated Series, and just finished Buffy Season 3 for its 25th anniversary, and we will be going through Season 4 for its 25th anniversary. May, where can everyone find you?
I also realized I basically didn't introduce myself at the top of the episode because I was like, gotta get this intro right. But you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at EversonPoe. That's EversonPoe. If you want to find my music, it's on Bandcamp and streaming services as Everson Poe. That's 2 separate words. I have just been upgraded to one of the co-hosts of Tender Subject, which is a cannibalism and body horror podcast with Kate Terry, who also hosts Fangs for the Memories. And
the Buffy podcast.
Most of the time, you can find me on The Lady Killers, a Feminine Rage podcast. We're on Twitter at The Lady K Pod and on Instagram at The Lady Killers Pod. We have weekly episodes that come out through the Bloody Disgusting Podcast Network. And yeah, our midsummer episode just dropped right before this recording, and people seem to be digging it. So
cool. And Dominic, where can everyone find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Dominic Burgess and Instagram at Dominic Burgess1 because someone else got there first. Or you can find me in person, probably roaming the Blu-ray section at Amoeba in Hollywood.
And Lev, where can everyone find you?
Let's see. I am on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. Mostly I'm active on Substack these days. So if you would like to read my Substack, you can find it. It's called Last Stop Corbinic. It has magician stuff. It has a lot of King Arthur stuff these days because of my King Arthur book coming out. But that's mostly where I'm active these days.
All right, cool. Well, thank you all for joining me. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.